Dan Bardell is a podcaster and presenter. You may have seen him on Sky recently, also with The Athletic. He's probably best known to Aston Villa fans as host of the Villa View and also the 1874 podcast with Greg Evans. So, Dan, welcome to the All Villa, No Filler podcast.
Thanks for having me. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, I'll ask you, all about the new content that's coming up on the Villa View channel just a bit later in our chat. But first, let's chat about how things are at Aston Villa right now. Unai Emery, he's the new manager. He's been in charge for 4 months. What have you made of his time in charge so far?
I think they're probably ahead of where I would have expected them to be when you think how bad they were under Steven Gerrard. I think he's rectified quite a lot of things in a short space of time. So I've done loads of podcasts this week already, the away form. For Villa to be top of the away league table since he's come in joint with Arsenal. Villa were useless away from home until he came in. I don't think we won a game away from home until Unai Emery took charge. So to have turned that around quite quickly is very, very impressive. I think away from home in particular, there's a defined way of playing that seems to be quite resilient and it seems to work. Home got off to a brilliant start, beating Manchester United. So he got another monkey off Villa's back straight away because you're the same age as me and Villa have done nothing at home to Manchester United in my lifetime. So to beat Manchester United in his first game straight away, he's done something that no other Villa manager since Brian Little has managed to do. So that's an achievement. I think maybe they've tried to be a little bit too expansive at home at times and maybe aren't ready for it. But I understand that he wants to create this connection with the fan base. He wants to entertain the fan base. And at times it's looked good and at other times it hasn't gone well. But I think all in all, even though it just seems like we're stuck in 11th, I think we are trending in the right direction and we're going really well under him. And whatever happens now, I think he needs 2, 3, 4 years because Villa aren't going to get a higher profile, better manager in than Unai Emery. For where they are, the club have done very well to get him in. I think the club's made a lot of mistakes over the last 18 months to 2 years, but to have pulled Unai Emery in, someone whose track record speaks for itself, I think that's very, very impressive. And he seems driven. It's the kind of club that he's done well at before, similar sized clubs in Spain. So I'm confident he'll get us moving in the right direction. He already has, but as we always say, he needs a pre-season. And I think once he gets a few of his own players in, you'll see Villa really start to make strides next season.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. If we looked at Steven Gerrard a year ago, a lot of us were probably saying, well, let's give him the pre-season and see where it goes. Whereas with
it was more hope, wasn't it, than in expectation? I know I was feeling that. Well, I said it. I always think a manager should get pre-season. If you've come in midway through the season, it's very, very difficult. And in Gerrard's defence, when he first came in, he did identify a few things and he did change a few things, and there was an upturn in results that pulled Villa away from relegation danger. But then in 2022, it was just a disaster, wasn't it? Villa were poor at the back end of last season and they were awful at the start of this season. But under Unai Emery, I don't feel like it is hope. I think there's genuine reasons to be excited and to think that this pre-season will be a good one.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's got that proven track record as well, hasn't he? Kind of, as you mentioned, you have 4 Europa Leagues. It just feels like, we've both been supporting Villa from pretty much an identical year in the early 90s. And, there have been some highs and there's been a lot of lows. Lots of different managers. Do you think, I might be getting a bit ahead of myself here and he's only been in charge for about 4 months. But do you think Emery might be potentially the best manager we've seen since we started supporting Villas in that 90s era?
I would say until he's come in. I mean, Ron Atkinson was my first manager, so I was kind of at the tail end of him. They won a Coca-Cola Cup and then the season after he went. I think Brian Little and John Gregory were successful managers. At that time, football was very different. They were right for Villa. They were good managers for Villa. And Brian Little, to be fair, his record was absolutely excellent. And John Gregory was unlucky not to do a little bit better as well. Then it's just been awful, except for Martin O'Neill, hasn't it? And then Dean Smith. But I think in terms of actually bringing in an elite manager, I think you're right. I think, Villa have done that with Unai Emery in our lifetime. That's the biggest, highest profile manager that Villa have brought in. If you actually think about the managers through the years, Villa haven't often pulled in a manager from abroad. It's very, very rare that they have, and usually when they have, it hasn't gone very well. But on this occasion, they've pulled someone in who's won trophies, and there's no reason why if he gets time, he seems like he wants to be here for the long term. Everything he talks about is geared towards the long term. No disrespect to West Ham, but West Ham were very close to getting to a European final last season. They were down in the doldrums before David Moyes came in and he got them going over the last few seasons. I know they're not doing great now, but they've had 2 excellent seasons. There's absolutely no reason why Unai Emery couldn't push Villa towards finishing 7th, finishing 8th, maybe winning a League Cup or an FA Cup, and then get Villa into Europe and have a good run, because that's what he's good at. And I think Villa fans should be excited about that. But we know that the first thing you got to do, you got to get into Europe. So I think if Villa get there, they'll be in for an exciting ride.
Yeah, completely. Because he kind of just has a bit of an aura about him, doesn't he? Considering what he has won before and the clubs he's managed at. And I think part of what I've wondered sometimes is why Villa aren't at kind of the level of a Liverpool and Man United, or it's not to do with like the size of the city or the fan base or anything like that. But at some point in the last 40 years, 50 years, Liverpool and United both got a manager with an aura, somebody who was able to lift them as a club kind of to a higher level. And I wonder if Villa, maybe since Ron Saunders, really haven't able to find that manager. And I'm not saying that Emery's going to be, leading us to win the Premier League title, or next year, you never know. But it's like it does feel like he has that aura, doesn't it? That I think we've maybe just lacked for a very long time in a manager.
Villa have had good managers and good teams, but Villa have always been a nearly team.
Yes,
since we've followed them, that's just the way it's been. I've interviewed John Gregory, and he completely agreed with that. He said exactly the same thing. It was always nearly like we had that season where we were top of the league for ages, and then we fell away in the second half of the season. The next season, they get to an FA Cup final, don't turn up on the day. Martin O'Neill so close to getting top 4 and getting that dream of Champions League football, didn't quite do it, didn't quite win the League Cup under him as well. So Villa have just always been a nearly team. So hopefully they've got the manager now that can just take them to that next step. But it's been so long now since Villa were that top 6 team. It's been over a decade. It's so hard to work your way back. And the landscape's just so different in football now in terms of the Premier League. Now, football is, Gary Neville always says this, football's always cyclical. So he always said at some point Manchester United will come good again and they'll get back to the upper echelons of the Premier League. And it looks like now they've won a cup. They're doing well in the league. That's starting to happen again. At some point, Villa will push towards that top 6 again. But it's harder now. And if they do it, they've just got to make that leap and make that next step. It's always that final hurdle that Villa seem to fall down on.
Yeah, it's just, can we one day get over that hurdle? Even like cup finals we've had this since 2000, it's just lose the 1-0, to Chelsea in 2000, the FA Cup final. It's so many moments like that, but hopefully it could finally be on the cusp of maybe overcoming that in the next couple of years. But, we'd look at kind of Emery's record, the most recent game was Everton, a really good 2-0 win. For some reason, we just seem to have a bit of a hoodoo over Everton. It's nice for us to have that over a different club rather than somebody else to have that over us, which seems always to be the case. So what did you make of the Everton win?
It was a good win. It was a solid away win, much like many of the away wins under Emery. I think they've all followed a similar pattern, haven't they? Villa have kept a clean sheet and they've managed to stay out the game relatively comfortably, which is something that you've not associated Villa with over the years. And I think to turn that away record round, like I said at the start, is very, very impressive. But they just seem to have a resilience away from home and a desire. They seem to get the bodies on the line and seem to be able to keep those clean sheets. And if you keep a clean sheet, at the moment, Villa have scored in every game under Unai Emery as well. So if you can keep a clean sheet at the moment, I'm absolutely jinxing us here. You're going to win the game because we're scoring in every game. We just haven't managed to get that same kind of balance right at home again. As I said at the start, I don't think we've quite worked out what we want to be at home yet, or maybe Unai Emery has worked out what he wants us to be, but we're not quite there yet. But we seem to be ready to do what he wants us to do away from home. And because we've got such a good record over Everton, I'm fully expecting them to get relegated and we'll never play them again. But we picked up some great wins away from home. Sean Dyche had won both home games until Villa came into town. Brighton were going very well when Villa went there and won. I think Spurs were probably on a bit of an iffy track. Southampton had just won a couple of games. We went there and won 1-0. So Villa away from home. The Man City game was a one-off, but to be honest, I didn't like the way we lost, but I didn't really expect anything in that game anyway. Barely anyone goes there and gets anything, so I kind of write that off. But, to have won every single other away game, I think that's incredible at this stage.
It is absolutely, it's brilliant. This early on in Emery's start as well, to have that many away wins that early on, it's very impressive. And as you say, the home form, it feels like at the moment we tend to be like one half good, one half bad at home. It's like we've started a few first halves against like Wolves, Leeds, Liverpool as well. In all those games, it felt like we could have conceded 2 or 3. And then Leicester, we made mistakes. And a lot of those mistakes, I think, have been from playing out from the back. But I'm very happy that we're playing out from the back. And I think those mistakes are probably, do you think they're reflective of a team that's in transition, just getting used to a new style of play?
I think it's just a concentration issue. And again, Villa have had these problems over the last few years. They're not just going to be ironed out overnight. Villa have conceded goals from bad mistakes in numerous games over the last few years. So I don't think it's a new thing. It's just decision making, and sometimes that's what separates the really good teams from the average teams. They're all good footballers. It's just decision making, and Villa's decision making at times hasn't been good. But I think they're getting there. I think they've scored a couple of goals from playing out from the back now. And Arsenal, they were quite erratic in possession towards the end of the game, Villa, and they weren't playing out from the back, and they were hoofing the ball clear and just kept coming back, and they conceded. So I'm happy that they're trying something. They're getting more comfortable with it as well. I think sometimes the crowd anxiety sometimes comes onto the pitch as well. I think Villa players are sometimes playing a little bit with the shackles on at home because they're scared of making a mistake, because the whole end where I sit is very, very vocal about the playing out from the back. But I think we've just got to grin and bear it and go with it, because I think we've already seen that when it works very well, and they will get better at it, and there'll be these teething problems. Villa were never going to be able to just completely change his way of playing and do it without making mistakes. So they've come, but I don't think they're too far away at home. There's a couple of things that have happened. A lot of games, I agree with you. There's been a few where Villa have, like, they might concede a few goals early on. Villa are scoring early goals as well. You think of some of the games that they've had. Leicester, they scored early. Arsenal, they scored early. Manchester United at home, they scored early. I think Leeds, they scored early as well. Yeah, so Villa, they're starting to get a few things right at home. I just think they're not quite there yet, and they've not quite got it defined what they want to be at home, and maybe he has to go back a little bit and maybe introduce some of the things that Villa do away from home into the way Villa play at Villa Park, because that's the thing with Emery. He has a defined way of playing. He's got all these subtle things that he does during games. He manages games. He changes things within the game. So maybe it's just a case of there's a few teething problems at the moment. Maybe we just introduce a couple of things that we're doing away from home, because I didn't think we looked uncomfortable against Everton, even when the game was 0-0, 60 minutes, and I didn't think we were playing well. We still didn't look really uncomfortable. Mings had one off the line, but Everton didn't create too much. I know they're not a creative team anyway, but I just don't think there's too much wrong at the moment. Villa have just had an absolutely atrocious start to the season, which is absolutely nothing to do with Emery. If Emery had been in from the start, there's no reason why we wouldn't be where Brentford and where Fulham are. When you look at what the results have been since Emery's come in, probably we would be around there. We're just in recovery from what was an awful start to the season.
Yeah, and I think what I liked as well was, against Arsenal, as you mentioned, we were sort of lumping the ball away towards the end of the game, and Emery even mentioned after the match that how frustrated he was by that. We sort of didn't stick to the game plan. Whereas against Everton in that first half, when they were putting us under more pressure than they did at the start of the first half, it kind of felt like Villa was sticking to that, passing it around, even when they were, boxing us in. We were trying to play it out, so it just feels like the players have bought in essentially to what Emery's ideas are. Whether some of them are well suited to it is another matter. But, some of the players have improved quite a lot, I think. And to me, 2 of those are Ollie Watkins and John McGinn. What are your thoughts on those 2 players at the moment?
I think with Watkins, I think the goals weren't there at the start of the season, but I actually think his all-round performances, there's not been a lot wrong with it the entirety of the season. If you think back to one of the rare good results we had under Steven Gerrard, Manchester City at home, Ollie Watkins was really good with scraps that day, held the ball up. He got Villa out of trouble a few times, relieved the pressure. Sometimes in and around the penalty box when you're trying to be intricate, his touch will let him down or he'll make a bad pass. That's been happening. But generally, I think to me, it looks like he's worked on his hold-up play a lot, and I think his hold-up play has been a lot better this season. And for where Villa are, I'm not sure what people expect. Ollie Watkins, if he plays every week, will score somewhere between 10 and 15 goals a season, I would say. The 20-goal a season striker is a rarity at the level Villa are at. They don't exist. Players that get 20 goals a season play for the top 6. You think of Newcastle at the moment. They're going very well, aren't they? I know they've had a bit of a blip recently, but they've been in the top 4 virtually all season. They haven't got anyone there that's going to score 20 goals. That player isn't there. Callum Wilson, like Watkins, would probably get, if he stayed fit, somewhere between 10 and 15. So I think people are maybe guilty sometimes of, you think you've got to have a striker that scores 20 goals. The modern day game's not like that. When Villa had a Dwight York, and I think Christian Benteke was probably a bit of an anomaly at the time that Villa picked him up and got lucky, really, didn't they? Because they couldn't have foreseen how good he was going to be for the football club. I think he pretty much had a 1-in-2 record. So I think Watkins was getting unfair criticism at the start of the season. It's great to see him in the last 5 games. His finishing's been excellent. His finish against Arsenal was a really good finish. Man City was a smart finish. He's adding different types of goals to his game as well. The header against Southampton, and it was nice for him to score that penalty at the weekend and for it to mean something, for it to be the winner in the game, because he's been hitting the back of the net, but we've been shipping goals left, right, and centre, and his goals haven't counted for anything. So for him to break that record and be the first player since 1985, I think it is, to score 5 in a row for Villa, the first player in Premier League history for Villa. It was nice that the goal meant something for him. And I'm a big fan of Watkins. When Ings left, I was defending him left, right and centre, because I think he's better suited for what Emery wants. And I think all-round game, I think he offers a team like Villa a lot more with the way he stretches defences. I think that brings players into the game better than Danny Ings did. There's nothing wrong with Danny Ings. He's a good footballer, but my preference of the two, because it didn't seem like they were ever going to play together, was Watkins. And it's nice that for once to have been proved right with something, and he's on a good run at the moment. And McGinn, I think he just suits Emery.
Yeah,
I think tactically McGinn's been really good under Emery. I think he's fitted into what Emery wants from that wide midfield / central midfield role better than anyone else in the squad has. Ramsey scored in the first game, but I think McGinn's handled that transition a little bit better than anyone else who's played there so far this season. It's just nice to see him influencing the game for higher up in the pitch, because the guy was visibly hamstrung under Steven Gerrard. Look, he said himself he wasn't playing well, and I'm not here trying to dress up and say John McGinn was playing well under Steven Gerrard, because he wasn't. But I do think part of that was to do with the way he was being asked to play. He wasn't allowed to do the things that he's good at. And we're starting to see now the things that John McGinn's good at, and to see him involved in both goals against Everton in terms of an assist and winning the penalty. He won a penalty against Brighton in an away game as well, driving into the box. That's what you want to see from John McGinn, and that's what we're starting to see now. And it would be good. I think the fans are starting to come back around to him again now, which is good, because the fans make a huge difference to the players. I was at an event at Villa Park just before Christmas, or before this. Don't think Emery was in yet. I think we were just about to play Nottingham Forest, and McGinn was at the event, and you could see he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. He was trying to be jovial and laugh with the fans, because that's what John McGinn is. That's what John McGinn does. But you could just see he wasn't quite himself. So I think now he'll be starting to get back to his normal self. He's starting to put in the performances again. He's starting to hear his name sung in the away end, in the home ends again. So I'm really pleased for him. I'm really pleased he's back in and doing well, because I think he suits what Emery wants. Yes,
completely. I mean, with McGinn, it's almost like since maybe even since the World Cup break, he looks almost a bit leaner and fitter, I think. And as you say, it kind of looks like he's been liberated by, I went to Crystal Palace away this season where we lost 3-1, and Douglas Luiz started on the bench and McGinn started the game. And I just remember the fans cheering when McGinn got taken off for Luiz. But the problem was McGinn was being asked to play in almost like a ball-playing deep line player.
Yeah, made no sense.
That's just not his strength, is it? It's that kind of, it's almost been maybe a second striker almost playing off of Watkins, or like a wider midfielder where he can do a bit more of the grunt work, but also get in positions closer to the area. And, I'm hoping that now he is getting near the area and getting assists, that a goal will come from him quite soon. But he's got the shackles off, and then Ollie Watkins as well. And I saw you mention this the other day actually about his hold at play, and it's really noticeably improved. And again, I don't know whether it's Unai Emery's in his ear and coaching him, or whether he's just gained confidence because Danny Ings has gone and he doesn't really have that sort of maybe a bit of a competition going on. But he's got the goals coming in now, and then you look at the Buendia goal the other day against Everton, and it actually started from a long ball forward to Watkins and a layoff to, I think it was McGinn, and then took it forward and played it off to Buendia. So just a couple of elements of those players have really, I don't know, it's very encouraging to see. But, you look at the squad and you think, this summer, Christian Perzo himself said that Villa is going to be very busy this summer. Where do you think in the squad that Villa or rather maybe Unai Emery would like to improve and get a few more players in?
I think you'll see Guendouzi come in. I'd be very surprised if he didn't come in the summer. I know that the Villa were interested in him. in the summer when I was working at Sky. That was one that was coming up every day, and speaking to French journalists and stuff who were close to Marseille, they were saying there's definitely interest from Villa. I think the fee was perhaps a bit inflated in January, so I think Villa will be back in for him. And again, a bit like McGinn, I think he suits that hybrid wide midfielder role, but also if Luiz or Kamara's out, he can easily play there. He's played with Kamara at Marseille as well. He's worked with the manager before, so I think he makes an awful lot of sense, and I think he'll be someone that comes in. Greg is telling me that Villa will 100% go big on a striker in the summer, but it's so hard to buy a striker. But I think this time, I think almost with Watkins, he felt like his nose was put out of joint a little bit with Danny Ings. You could see that they both wanted to make it work, but it never quite did. And Watkins had a really good season that first season. Then Villa just bought a new number 9, and I'm not sure Watkins liked that. I think he thrives off being the main man. But with the way that Emery sets up, the fact that we do 100% always play with 2 players playing as strikers near enough, that new striker coming in doesn't mean Ollie Watkins comes out of the team. Yeah. So Villa will, in the dream world, I think maybe someone like Tammy Abraham, if we could get someone like him, that level of striker back, that would be a nice combination. And maybe, I think a lot depends on Carlos. I think if Carlos comes back and can hit the ground running and hasn't lost a yard, he's still the same player. Not convinced that we'll sign an Emery centre-back, because I think Carlos could be the Emery centre-back again, because they've played before, and I know that Emery was a massive driver in Tyrone Mings' new contract. So you kind of think those two will be the number 1 pair, and then you've still got Konsa. I'd expect Chambers to go, and then maybe they'd sign a younger, up-and-coming centre-half to add competition. Other than that, I don't think you'll see too much. Emi Martinez, obviously, look, if he goes, they'd have to sign a goalkeeper desperately. Yeah. But again, I was pretty convinced that he might go, but Greg's telling me he doesn't think he will. So we'll see what happens in the summer. I'm doing something with Neil Cutler tonight, so I'm going to be interested to ask him what he thinks, whether he thinks Emi will be there next season or not, because they're very, very close still. So hopefully I can get a bit of a scoop on the Villa View tonight. I don't think you'll see 6, 7, 8 players come in. You'll see 3 or 4 players of substance, high-level players come in, and then I don't think we're too far away. At the moment, there's some good players at Villa. I think they're just maybe lacking in a couple of areas, and they're lacking a bit of depth. But by getting in those extra pieces of quality, you'll see an improvement, and you'll see an improvement in consistency as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it'll be just a few, but maybe we might reach a kind of financial level of spending that we haven't actually done before. I think our most expensive sign is Buendia at 38 million. And so I thought I'm with you. Guendouzi from Marseille, I think, is just a link that just won't go away, is it? So, and I'd to be honest, I'd kind of love it if he did turn up. But, our next few fixtures, Crystal Palace, West Ham, Bournemouth and Chelsea. What do you make of those fixtures? And also, realistically, where would you like to see Villa finish this season?
I'd be happy with 10th. Look, if we can finish in the top 10, I do think I don't think we'll get into Europe, but I think there's an opportunity there if we can get a bit more consistency in our game of pushing for 8th, maybe 9th. Yeah. That would be a very good season for Villa, especially when you take into account the start that they had. It's been a bit of a funny Premier League season this season because Liverpool have struggled and Chelsea have struggled. So they're kind of floating around where we are, which you wouldn't really normally expect to see. So I do think there's an opportunity for top 10, and Villa haven't finished in the top 10 since 2011. Yeah. Now under Gerard Houllier, when they somehow managed to finish 9th after a bit of a, they finished 9th on 42 points or something ridiculous. Yeah. In that season, that 42 points would never have got you 9th in previous seasons, or probably seasons gone by, but it got Villa 9th that season. Just been nowhere near that. I think the lockdown season, they should have finished top half. I think if Grealish had stayed fit, I think Villa would have done what West Ham had done and perhaps finished 6th, 7th and got into Europe. But Grealish missed too long and Villa couldn't function without him because everything was built too heavily around him. So I think just trying to get a bit of consistency, trying to get more to grips with what Emery wants. If they can finish top 10, I think that's a good season, and then there's reasons to be positive going into next season. They've got to sort the home form out there. It's difficult, isn't it? Because the away form's so good. They've got to do something at home, but then if suddenly they keep the away form and sort the home form, they'll be winning every week, which is not feasible, is it? It's just not feasible.
Well, you never know. Before the end of the season, I'm sure, Arsenal top of looking over their shoulders at Villa, panting down, chasing them down. But, Basically, the Villa View, it's been a big part of influencing our podcast and lots of other Aston Villa podcasts. I'm sure you've been a big leader in that, and thanks for doing that, basically, and providing all that content, because it's entertained us all over the years. But you've got some new services coming out on there. So do you want to tell us about what we can all kind of like look forward to on the Villa View coming soon?
Yeah, I think that had to be some form of change. So obviously years and years ago, I was living in London. Tom Julian was living in London. So every week, once a week, we had access to podcast facility basically for free. Because you'll know, fan channels don't make any money or much money at all. So, you're doing it because you enjoy doing it. But we had a good rhythm with that. We had that podcast, and I think that was probably, obviously my old man said as always in a podcast, but that was the first video podcast where you could see two Villa fans sat in a room and they'd be having a chat. I think people enjoyed that. It was an hour every week. We had it was more like it was scheduled. You knew that was going to come out once a week. And I think me and Tom had a good balance. And I think people enjoyed that. And it was sad when it had to stop. Although at the time, I think it felt like it had come to its natural conclusion, because I just started at the Athletic doing Villa stuff. And Tom was obviously moving to Germany, and he's gone off to Germany, and still don't know how he got that job, but he's absolutely thriving there and doing really well as the head of comms at the Bundesliga. So how he got that job, I still don't know. But he's doing well. I still speak to Tom probably most days.
Right.
We had a little break, and then obviously COVID hit, and a guy called Adam Bates, who'd watched the channel, asked if we'd consider bringing it back over COVID. He said he had this software, or he had this way of doing things where it didn't matter that Tom was in Germany. We could come on, because this kind of podcast that we're doing now on Zoom, that wasn't really a thing.
Yeah,
back then.
Yeah.
Podcasts were done next to each other. People hadn't really delved into Zoom too much. So then lockdown kind of gave an opportunity, probably for loads of Villa podcasts to start. It gave me and Tom a chance to start doing it again, and we weren't doing anything else with our lives because we were all just sat at home. So when the football came back, you could literally watch the game, and then we'd jump straight on our laptops and we'd do a podcast. Villa fans would probably finish watching the game, and they'd watch the show straight after the game. So it came back, and then Tom discovered that he wasn't really allowed to be doing podcasts anymore. So then the Villa Views just kind of fell into this online way of doing things over the last few years. But we had the two shows, so the post match point with Purity, and then we'd always try and do some midweek shows as well. But because I was so busy with normal media work, I started to struggle to find time to do the Villa View and put as much into it as I wanted. I was having stuff going on in my own private life as well, in my life, that was causing a lot of upheaval, and I wasn't able to put in the time that I wanted to the Villa View. So everything's settled down a bit for me now. I've got my set schedule of what I do in the media, so it's easier to sort out. There's a good group of us now, rather than relying on just two people to do things, like when it was just me and Tom, and then Dolan would come in when Tom wasn't around or I wasn't around. I've now got all these people who've become really good friends. We speak every day, so it's just, I feel more settled now, and it's just been an opportunity to bring it back and put more stuff in. So over the last maybe month or so, I've moved now. I'm back in the Midlands, which I haven't been for a long time. So just feel a bit more settled now and able to put the time into it, because I do it as a hobby, really. The Villa View for me, I started it because I wanted to get into the media, and for me, it's ended up doing that for me. So I was really pleased with that. But I do the Villa View because I like talking to my friends about Villa, basically, and I still enjoy doing it, and I've got the time to do it. So as long as I enjoy doing it, I'll keep doing it. So saw Stato's stuff, AVFC Stato on Twitter. I think his stats are really good, like the time he puts into it, the stuff he comes up with, and I just thought there was an opportunity there for there to be a show dedicated around that, and thankfully he said yes, and he wanted to do it. He was a bit reluctant at first. He was a little bit shy, but he's starting to come out of his shell a little bit now, and he's keen, and I think he's enjoying it, and I think it was something he wanted to do. So I'm not taking the credit for it at all, but I think it gave him some confidence to come and do it. I'm glad he's doing it, and he seems to enjoy it, and his stuff's so good that it deserves more than just being tweets, and we can put some colour behind it now and have a chat. And like I say, he's coming out of his shell, and it's great to see. And then just 1874, unfortunately, the Athletic got taken over and decided to go in a different direction with things, and 1874 was something that fell by the wayside, along with a few other club pods. But again, me and Greg have still been speaking since, and always kind of wanted to do it and missed speaking to each other and doing the podcast. So again, time being a factor, there was just a chance to get it back on the Villa View and see where it takes us. And it's got off to a good start, actually, because it's getting over 10,000 views, listens across everything in the first 2 or 3 episodes. So people are obviously keen for it to come back. I get tweets about it. I think in Greg's articles, people were commenting saying that they missed it and they wanted it back. I just think it's a nice supplement to what Greg does. You can put a bit of colour behind what Greg's doing, what he's been writing about. It's different, isn't it? Because of the way he takes in games, and he's at the press conferences, he's in the tunnel after the games. He's offering something that's a little bit unique. So I think it was just a case. I'm not doing stuff for the sake of it, but trying to get a bit more of a rhythm going with the Villa View and getting 2 shows in that probably offer something a little bit different to what else is out there. Because there is just so many podcasts now, and everyone will have their favourite one that they listen to, or there'll be some people that listen to every single podcast that there is. But I think though with those 2 shows, it's something that's a little bit different to add to the stuff that we're already doing. So hopefully people are enjoying it, and hopefully it can continue. Yeah,
I was very glad to see the 87-4 come back, because it got me through the pandemic. I basically because when Villa were playing, it was during that spell, wasn't it, where we were fighting to stay up, and every week Villa would just about lose or draw in some way. And every week I just remember listening to you both talking, listening to you particularly, obviously, as the Villa fan on the podcast, and been just like, oh my God, how can we not just get that winner? And then when we eventually stayed up, it was absolutely just amazing.
I credit Greg, because he still had belief that Villa would stay up all the way through that. And I was thinking, what is this guy on?
Yeah,
honestly, how can he think that there's absolutely no chance Villa are going to stay up? A bit like when people used to send in when we were in the Championship, if we could just win 10 games in a row, then we'll go up. And I was thinking, absolutely no chance that's going to happen. And then Villa go and win 10 games in a row and get promoted via the playoffs. So football's a funny game. Like, if you go back and listen to some of the things you say on podcasts, and then how that's aged, like weeks, months, years later. God, I've said some terrible stuff over the years, but that's what being a football fan is. That's what being a Villa fan is. We've all got our opinions. You can say something, with your chest at one time, and you think that's correct, what I'm saying. I remember when I used to lay into Douglas Luiz quite a lot, and now he's one of my favourite players. Things just completely can change, can't they? But that's what happens when you're doing a podcast about the team you support. You can look an idiot sometimes. Yeah,
the amount of times I look back on some of the football opinions I have on Twitter and from years ago and think, right, where's the button to unfollow myself?
Yeah. You won't have said as much rubbish as me. Absolutely.
Right. Obviously you're also doing stuff now on Sky as well. I've seen you on there, and you're doing quite a bit of stuff now, I guess. So how's that experience? You enjoying it?
Yeah, good, because it's ultimately that was what I wanted to get to and what I wanted to do. I think having the chat, first of all, you've got to be given the chance by someone, and I was very lucky at the Athletic that they gave me a chance to not move away from Villa, but to supplement my Villa stuff, and they gave me some England stuff. In fact, they gave me quite a lot of England stuff during the Euro. So I was doing a show every day for them, which still blows my mind that the 2 hosts of that were me and Mark Chapman, because at that point particularly, I had absolutely no right to be sharing hosting duties with Mark Chapman. Absolutely none at all. I still haven't now, in fairness. So that kind of gave me lift off a little bit. And the fact England got all the way to the final, as well. If England had dropped out of the group stage, that would have done nothing for me. But because England did well as well, and the whole country was interested in what England were doing, that was very good for me. And because they thought I'd done well, they gave me Premier League stuff since. So I was fortunate really to get the opportunity, because there's Villa, which will always be my bread and butter, and Villa is always my main passion. But to progress, you need more than that. You need to be able to talk about more than that. And because I watch so much football and have an interest in football so much anyway, I always wanted to do other stuff. So I've just been lucky really that the Athletic gave me a chance. Who Scored is, it was a Villa fan running their podcast, Martin Lawrence. So I got pulled in to do their podcast as well, which is a Premier League preview show. So I host that. And then after the Euros, again, lucky, and I got an agent, which is a massive thing in the industry, and that's what's got me into Sky.
Yeah.
Really, the fact that I've got an agent and they've got those relationships, and that they pulled me in, and to be sat around that desk in Sky Sports News doing live shows, that is, to me, that's, if I died tomorrow, I'm happy that I've ticked off a goal that I would have always wanted to do. I'm still nowhere near where I want to be, but I've sat around that desk at Sky Sports News and spoke about football, and that, when I started doing the Villa View 7 years ago or whatever it was, if you'd have told me then I'm going to go on and do that, I'd have been absolutely delighted. So it's a hard industry. It can be up and down. Like some months I'm really busy, some months it feels quiet, and you worry and you think, God, what's next? But I feel like I've broken in, and I mean, it's just about trying to be like Villa, just trying to get some consistency now, and try and keep myself there, and try and pick up new stuff, try and build on the stuff that I've been doing, and we'll see what happens, because I've got hopefully things that will happen that are in the pipeline. But there's a lot of waiting in the media game, but it's nice, and I owe the Villa fans tons, because without people ever being bothered about what I was saying, tuning in and watching the podcast and watching the Villa View, I'd be nowhere. I owe loads of people. I owe Greg, because he was the one that got me into the Athletic in the first place to do the Villa podcast. So you have to be lucky along the way. I've had my fair share of misfortune. I've been unlucky. I've come close to things a few times and been the second choice and not quite got there and things like that. But you need help. You'll never get there on your own, and I've been really, really lucky with the support I've had, and the main one has been the Villa fans, because whenever they see me on Sky, the nice messages and the nice tweets that I get, it's because they feel like they've been on this kind of journey with me. It's really, really nice. And you get the odd person on Twitter giving you stick and stuff, but in person at Villa Park, when I'm at Villa Park, people are so nice to me, so lovely to me, and it's I love it, because ultimately I'm just a Villa fan at the game, aren't I? That's what I'm doing. I've had my season ticket since I was 7. I'm there the same as everyone else. So it's nice that people want to speak to me and, are proud of me, because without them, I'd be absolutely nothing.
Yeah, it's inspiring stuff to hear and to see. It's always just good to see a Villa fan, living out the dream, essentially. It's just, I don't know, to have seen it sort of go.
I think
on
a Brummie as well. There's not many.
Yeah,
Brummies out there doing stuff. It doesn't fail. Obviously, there's Gabby. On TalkSport, but other than that, I can't really think of anyone that's in and around football. Talking about it. So it's nice to feel that, like, when when Villa, something's happened with Villa, for example, Sky want to get me on TalkSport, want to speak to me. These companies, BBC, they want to talk to you. And again, when I started, I wanted to kind of be the go-to person for talking about Villa, and I think I can probably say that I've ticked that off. So I've achieved a lot of what I wanted to achieve, but it's the same with everything. Once you always want more. There's always more you can do, and you want to do better. And I think I've still got a long way to go, to be honest.
Well, that's exciting to hear, and also just before we wrap it up, I'll just ask you a couple of questions, because we're both, as I said earlier, we both started supporting Villa at the exact same time, pretty much. I think 92.
Yep.
So I just kind of look back on it all. It's been a slog for a long time supporting Villa. It's always been the easiest club to support. But for you, who was your favourite player growing up, and what was your best memory of supporting Aston Villa?
Everyone knows the answer that I'm going to give to the favourite players. Tails.
Yeah,
I just absolutely loved the guy. Just loved him as a footballer. Loved that he was a Villa fan. Loved the way he played the game. Like, he'll sit there and say he wasn't the most talented player in the world, but he just did his job. He knew what he was good at, and he did his job every week, and he played with passion, and he played for Villa. He loved the badge, and he loved the club. So just the way he played the game and the way he was for Villa, he was just always my hero. And again, when I was a kid, if you'd have said to me that you'd go on and be friends with Ian Taylor, I'd have been absolutely buzzing. That's probably, if I take everything else away, the fact that that's probably happened is probably one of the biggest things that's happened to me as a Villa fan, because I cannot tell you how much I loved that guy.
Yeah,
and I still love him now, and he knows I do as well, and he plays on it a little bit at times as well. But he's a lovely person. Like, when you're around him, you just laugh. You spend the whole time smiling and laughing. He's such a fun person to be around, and he's exactly as you'd imagine he would be as well. I think that's probably one of the other things from doing all this stuff, is that people always say, don't meet your heroes.
Right.
I can't think of many people that I've met. I've met so many players who I loved watching as a kid. They've all been lovely.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's a special thing having your favourite footballers and meeting them, because when you were a kid, you would have absolutely dreamed about stuff like that. So Tails was always my absolute hero. Whenever anyone used to ask me who my favourite footballer was in the world, it was always Ian Taylor.
Right.
I
Yeah.
loved other footballers. I was a massive fan of loads of footballers, both in the Premier League and abroad. Thierry Henry, Bergkamp, for example, I absolutely loved those two. Teddy Sheringham was someone that was always my favourite. But I'd always say Ian Taylor, my favourite
Right.
footballer, because he lived our dream, didn't he?
Yeah.
He did what we want. And I've gone so much on about him, I can't remember what the second part of the question was.
And also your best memory, I guess, of supporting Villa. What's been like your favourite moment, or yeah,
Really don't know, you know.
yeah,
I like to think it still hasn't happened.
right, okay, yeah,
I was so young when Villa won those two Coca-Cola Cups. I don't really remember them. And you
right,
take it for granted because you just think that it's going to be every few years. And Villa were in Europe all the time. So again, I was so lucky that my dad didn't used to care that I had school the next day. So he'd take me to all the midweek games. It wouldn't be a problem. I'd never miss them. So I was at those. Remember that UEFA Cup run in 97, 98? I was there for every single one of those
oh,
games
right, wow,
at Villa Park, and they were all great. That was the 90s were a good time when
yeah,
Brian Little
right,
and John Gregory were in charge. They were good times. They were probably my favourite times as a Villa fan. But the playoffs, it was good, but again, like, because I just never expected Villa to ever be in the Championship,
yeah,
and it
yeah,
felt like a real slog trying to get out of there. I don't think I enjoyed it. I think it was more like, thank God for that.
yeah,
Thank
yeah,
God we're
yeah,
back in the Premier League. Hopefully we can stay there now. So I don't think I've got. I don't think I've got a favourite. I've had loads of like mini periods where I've really enjoyed things. Like there was been a period recently where I was getting to know a few players and stuff, and enjoyed that period because I knew the people that were playing. But I like to think it hasn't happened, and that
yeah.
one day the people of our generation and if we think we've got it bad, there's people beneath us
Oh,
who are younger than us who just have known literally nothing. You think of Max Stokes at Villa on tour.
yeah,
He's travelled the country watching absolute rubbish generally.
yeah, yeah,
He's never seen Villa be good.
yeah,
But so there's us who feel hard done by, but then there's going to be generations underneath us that are even worse. So I like to think for all of us
yeah,
that best time is still to come, because we're still relatively young. As much as 40's coming around quicker than I would like it to, we're still. I'd just like to see Villa win something with my dad
yeah,
one more time, because, as I say, it hasn't happened since 1996, and he's not getting any younger. I still go to Villa Park with him every Saturday. I just want to see Villa win one more thing with my dad. That's what I'd like to see. So I hope that the best things yet to come.
yeah. That's hopefully under Professor Unai, as I call him, that could be
Got to
about to
be. If it's
happen.
not happening
That's
under him,
like
it's never happening.
it ain't, is it?
Yeah.
And I mean, we started supporting Villa in 92, 93 season when Villa came second in the Premier League. So it was the one year ever I could have been accused of being a glory supporter. It hasn't quite been that way since. But
Even then, it was nearly. We
yeah,
nearly won the league.
exactly. Like just blew it in the sort of last 5 or 6 games of the season and losing to teams like Oldham Athletic. I remember, like, oh my god. But Dan, honestly, it's been absolutely brilliant to chat to you and to meet you.
Thanks for
First
having
time
me.
we've met, and the vast majority of people watching this will obviously most likely be following you already on Twitter and that. But for anyone who isn't, where can we find you and your content online?
I've got to try and remember the Villa Views Twitter at her. I think so. Obviously, I've got my own where I tweet about Villa quite a lot. It's quite easy to remember. It's just at Dan Bardell, and then I think it's at the Villa View _ because someone had already took the Villa View. So that just tells you about. That just tells you when the videos are coming out. So yeah, the Villa View on YouTube is where you'll mainly see me talking about Villa or hear me talking about Villa. But man, I've enjoyed coming on. I could literally just talk to people about Villa all day, and some days that is what I literally do.
Yeah.
All day, talk about Villa and talk about football. But no, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on. It's nice to talk about things sometimes and realise, I don't talk about the stuff I've done. I'm not very good at like looking back and thinking, oh, that was a big milestone. That was something you did that you'd always want to. So in doing this podcast today, I've managed to do that. So thanks to you.
No worries. Great to have you on.